Hey guys, welcome to this new video where we'll be looking at if statements in PHP. Now, picking up where we left off with our index page, we will just want to make our index page. Like I said, it's the first page you land on, so it's our landing page, it's our home page. So from here, we're going to add a few anchor tags that will allow us to navigate to all the other sub files that we have for this lesson. So I have added a few courses, or a few pages rather, to go alongside each lesson for this course. So for this section of the course, we'll be looking at arrays, for and while loops, and if and switch statements. Is for if statements, but let me just give you a bigger picture. When it comes to programming, we talk about these things called control statements, and there are three types of control statements. You have sequence, then you have selection, and then you have repetition. Not necessarily in that order, but the one that's absolute is always sequence, meaning whatever sequence you write your code in, that's how it will be executed. That's a general idea of the sequence control structure. So just like with printing this page, we wrote the H1 tag first, then the expectation is that it should be at the top of the page. And everything that we write in the order that we wrote it, it will be executed accordingly. For selection, it means that if you have to make a decision or a choice between two options, two or more options, then you have to make a selection or a decision. So that's the next control structure, and that is a control structure that the if statement represents. So I have gone ahead and set up an H2 tag with some list items, and these list items are really just anchor tags to different pages that we're going to create here in our site. So already you can see how you can go about stringing together an PHP site. If you're used to how to do it with a static HTML, it's the same principle with a PHP. The only difference is that each page should be ending with .php. So the next page that we're going to create in our site is the if statement.php. So back to the Explorer pane, I can just go ahead and create a new file. And then I'm going to name it if statement.php, and there it is created. The next thing I want to do is just bootstrap this HTML5 boilerplate template, and I'm going to give this page of name PHP primer -if statements. Now in programming, there are quite a few times that we would probably want to make a decision, and one easy way would be to say if somebody passes or fails based on their grade. Now that we're doing PHP, we'll carry out every action inside of a PHP tag. So I'm just going to spin up my PHP tag from here, and every bit of code that I write, everything that I want to go on the page, I will do from between these tags. Now I'm just going to put on a comment and say if this, we're just going to be looking at if statements, and the first thing that should be printed to the page is an H2 tag with the words if statement. So we know that whatever we echo should be rendered on our page in correct HTML according to how we wrote it. Now let's try something simple. Let's declare a variable here in our PHP tags and call it grade. And I'm going to assign grade to have the value 50. Which is generally the pass mark in most institutions. Now we want to look at how we could print out red text if the person has failed, or green text if the person has a passing mark. So in PHP, the if statement looks something like this. We write the word if, then we open brace, and Visual Studio is automatically closing it for me because they don't want me to forget to close it later on. If you're not using Visual Studio Code and your editor does not do it like this, then make sure you close it first. So open and close at the same time so you don't forget down the road. We're all human. And then what I do after opening and closing is type the variable. So the variable is going to come under scrutiny. And then I know I need to decide under what circumstances will I take what action. So I have my variable, which implicitly has a value, and then I need to compare it with something so I can make a decision based on that comparison. In this situation, we did say that if the passing mark is 50, then anything over that or over is a pass, and anything anything under is a failure. So I'm going to say if the variable grade has a value that is greater than, and we're using the greater than sign, or equal by using the equal sign, and then I give a comparable value. So inside of these braces, I'm going to say if said variable meets this condition with this value, right? So the condition is greater than or equal to some value, then, and well, there is no word then, at least not in PHP. So we open and close curly braces this time. All right, and I'm just going to break a line in between. So we have the parentheses, the regular brackets that we all write and used to love in the English language. And then we have the curly braces, which, well, we use less frequently in English, writing, but very frequently in coding. So we open the curly brace, and then inside of those curly braces, we put whatever actions you want to carry out. So I'm just going to keep it simple right now, and I'm going to say echo, and I'm going to echo an H3 tag, and I'm going to say you have passed. All right. So we're not yet at setting the colors. I'm just echoing something simple just to demonstrate this if-else selection. So we have if and a condition, and this condition will contain some variable or some value on the left, some comparison operator, and comparison operators can be, and I'll just write them, it can be equal meaning equivalent, it can be greater than, it can be less than, it can be greater than or equal. Well, I really know which one is which, whether it's greater than or less than, but the fact is you can pair them. So whichever one you are using, you can pair with an equal sign. All right. So you can look if it's exactly the same. And I think in PHP you have a triple equal sign. So I'll just put that here. So that way you can compare if they're the same value and data type. This one looks at the value. If it's greater than, less than, or less than and equal, greater than and equal. So if this condition is true, if this comparison is the one that works because grade is greater than or equal to 50, then we will echo the sentence you have passed. And then we can say else to give an alternative to say, meaning if this is true, then it will do that. If this is not true, then do this. So it's just like, if it is raining, I'll go outside. Otherwise, I'll stay inside. So, this would be that one condition that determines what you will do. And if that condition doesn't hold true, then you'll do something else. That's what if else really means. So here I would just echo you have failed. So I'll just copy this code, work smarter, not harder. And I'll say you have failed. Now let's browse to this page and see what the outcome of this bit of code is. So I'm just going to go back to my browser where I already have my index page, and I'm going to refresh because I made some changes since the start of this video. And here we see we have all of those links as we outlined in the index page earlier. And one of them is the if statement. So I can just click this and it will browse to the if statement page, and notice the change in the link. It goes from PHP primer to PHP primer / if statement.php. And then once we land on that page, we see you have passed. Now, if I change this grade to 30, then we should see something else being printed. So I change the grade to 30, save that change, refresh, and then it's telling me you have failed. All right, so we can tell that it is making a decision. It is comparing whatever value is inside of this variable with this variable to see if it is greater than or equal. If it is, then it prints you are passed, and if it is not, then it says you're failed. Now, we said we wanted it to print in red or green, so I'm just going to add some CSS right here inside this tag, and I'm going to say style equals. And then if in case you're not necessarily familiar with CSS, this is what you call inline CSS, where you use the style attribute. It works in regular HTML. So if I wanted to do that, I could say h3 open. Oh, sorry, I can't do that inside of PHP tag. Let me do that above h3 and then open and close h3. And then if I wanted to make this red, I would just go onto the h3 tag, press a space between the tag name and the angle bracket, and then type the attribute style, and then make it equal to some value, some selector and value pair. So the selector value pair here for color would be literally color, and I would say red or green or blue, just to keep it simple. So the same way I can construct this in regular HTML, I can actually echo that in the PHP. So I'm just going to copy this part, since that's the part I have outstanding, and I'm going to paste it here. And notice I can use the double quotation marks inside of the single quotation marks. But if you mess that up and you use single quotation marks here, then it can cause problems and you'll have to end up concatenating and complicating relatively simple situation. So just be careful. If you open with single quotes and you need quotes inside, use double quotes, and vice versa. So I'm going to add that to this. So this should print, well, this should print green since you have passed. And if you have failed, then it will print the same h3 tag in red. And then let's try that again. So I'm going to refresh this page, and we're still on the failure value. So you see that it has turned to red. And then if I up this to 80, which is greater than or equal to 50, then it should print in green. All right. So that is how, you know, you're on the websites and you see that dynamism between whatever you put in and the color schema that you get back and the visual cues. This is all they're doing. They're just saying, if you put in a certain value that we don't like or we don't approve of, then display red text. If we approve of it, then display green text. That's all it's saying. If some condition, else. Now, if we had three conditions, let's say we had 3 tiers of grading, we can say if then else. So I'll just write if, else, if, and else. All right. So what if you had 3 or more conditions that you needed to compare? Like, for instance, you had, maybe you wanted to print out the letter grade based on the grade that the person got. So I can redeclare grade right here. Once again, these variables are not strongly typed, so I can easily declare it as a string this time. So it's a number up here and it's a string down here. And once again, sequence rules. So it starts off as a number, then it does all of these operations as a number, but then once it gets here, it realizes, oh, my master wants me to change to a letter. So it becomes a letter, and then we'll start doing some operations down here with it as a letter. Now, this is not necessarily recommended. I'm just doing this for example purposes, but PHP is that flexible. Now let's get to work. So we will say if, and that syntax is pretty much the same. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. You ask why you have to put in the braces. Just know that if you don't, it doesn't work. That's just the rule that the programming language abides by. So we say if open brace and then our condition, which is grade. And let's say if it is equivalent to an A, then we print. And then there are times when if you're doing one line after the if statement, then you don't need your curly braces. I recommend them though, because if you intend to expand the code later on, then they're already there, right? So no harm, no foul. So if grade is equivalent to A, then I want to print out an H2 tag. And I'm going to say, you are a superstar, exclamation, close. All right, we'll come back and deal with the colors later on. So then we close that, and remember we end every line with a semicolon. If you don't, then you'll end up with some problems with some curly braces, some red lines, sorry. And if I refresh this page, then it will tell you that you have a syntax error. It won't necessarily spell out, oh, you're leaving off a semicolon on this line, but it will just express you that you have an error. So just remember your semicolons and remember to follow the rules of the programming language. So I can say if the grade is equivalent to A, then you are print that you're a superstar, else if, and then we specify another condition, which I'm just going to copy this condition. It could be else if the grade is equivalent to B, then we can still motivate the person. So I'm going to say echo, and I'm going to echo in an HTML tag, h2 this time again, and say you did well, exclamation sign. So we're still encouraging the person. But then if they got a C or any grade that below that, and then of course these conditions are based on what values you know will be there, because if the person got an A plus, then the else would not detect that, oh, it's near an A. So, you know, you have to code according to your context. If I'm just doing A, B, C, D, E, F, I know that there's no A plus or B minus or anything like that, then I can do this. But then if I wanted to send the same message for different tiers, then I'll have to add on operators like and then say another conditions. I could say and grade, or I can say rather, grade is equivalent to another value. Then it will say if it is this value or it is that value, then do this. All right. So, you know, for your context, you'll be very particular about how you write your if, else, if, and else statements. But every else, if, else statement must end with an else, because the else is the catch-all. It means that if nothing matches these two conditions, then it must match. Just catch it and do something. All right. So then if anybody got a C in this class after this good tutelage, then we will say you have failed. All right. And just let them know nice and gently that they didn't pass the course. All right. So they either got an A, a B, and they passed, or they failed. And then if I run this code with the A, then I should say, I'll just refresh, you are a superstar. All right. If I change the variable's value to B and rerun, save and then rerun, then I will see a different message. And just the same, if I put anything that's not an A or a B, then it is going to print that you have failed. All right. And then just to add a bit of color to it, we can just copy the styles from up above. So you are a superstar prints in nice green. And then I'll just use that same style because it's the same code. It's just the value that changes. So if you did well, you get blue text. And then if you fail, then you get red text. All right. So if you are a superstar, you get green. If you did well, you get blue. And then if you failed, you get red. And then I can just reprint that. So you have failed should print with red. All right. And then if you can go ahead and experiment and change the values and expand the list to account for more than three values based on the grading scheme that maybe you passed through the college you went to with. And then you will see how dynamic this if else can make your code. All right, thanks for sticking around. And if you have any difficulties or any questions, feel free to drop me a line and I'll be sure to reach out and help.